Curious to see what our next panel has to offer. Now we're going to shift our focus a little bit from finance directly to what maybe finance can go to, and specifically technology, and how tech can be used to address the SDGs. To do this, we're going to start with a panel hosted by Charly Kleisner, the co-founder of TONIIC and KL Felicitas Foundation. And after that, we'll be followed by Gunther Schall, the head of Unit Private Sector and Development at the Austrian Development Agency, who will hold a short keynote and help us to launch a new acceleration program on this topic of tech for SDGs, which is done in collaboration between the Austrian Development Agency, the University Tech Incubator INITS, and Impact Hub Vienna. So this is what's coming up. Now I would invite the panel onto the stage and also remind our audience, both live and at home, that you can interact with the panel. We have, of course, for those in the audience, simply raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone for you. For everyone virtually, we definitely encourage you to engage. You have access to Slido. Also, the in-person audience has Slido with the QR code. The hashtag is ID Studio. I see we have a small mix-up with ID Stage. The hashtag is ID Studio, so please use that. And to make sure that our virtual audience is well represented, I will be your voice on the panel. I will be sitting on the panel, seeing your questions, and making sure as many of these questions as possible get to the panelists. So with that, I hand it over to Charly Kleisner and the other panelists, and look forward to the session.
All right, thank you, Uli, for this inspiring and sobering, assessment, which I couldn't agree more with. And it's a great way to kick off, the challenges that we have. And this morning, I'm privileged to facilitate a discussion how technology can actually help in this transition and help the impact community and the ecosystem to do systemic change and not just to do incremental change. So we have a great panel here today. And to my far left, we have Ricardo. And he is representing the academic and research point of view with a specific focus on artificial intelligence. To my left, we have Jutta. And Jutta Grabenhofer, she is from Microsoft, and she will bring to us the view of the industry. And then online, we have Shermin. And Shermin is founder of Token Kitchen, author of Token Economy. And she will bring to us a view of tokenization of impact. And then myself, I'll pull it all together for you. So our objectives are that you walk away with a better understanding, how technology can actually help in this transition. And we look forward to a lot of good questions. We'll keep some time open for that. And also online. Okay, here we go. You already told us how to do that. And so let me just go into my own introduction a little bit. So most of you know me as an impact investor, but I'm actually a technologist. And so I have a PhD in computer science from the Technical University in Vienna, here in Vienna, and immigrated to Silicon Valley in '86. And worked for 3 high-tech startups that were all successful as the Vice President of Engineering, or CTO. The first company was Next, and I built the operating system for Apple at that point in time. And then I got into AI big time with a company called DataMind. And it was the first company that I'm aware of that commercially analyzed your behavior and monetized it, which is now a big business for Google and Facebook, and gone wrong, actually. And then my hat trick in Silicon Valley was a company called Ariba, which we took public, and it was the biggest e-commerce platform on the planet at the time. And that was bought up by SAP in 2012 for about $5 billion US. And that company made me wealthy, and that's how I became an impact investor, and I tell you that now I'm threading the needle back into technology with what I do. So that's a little bit my own background, and I would like to frame a few questions for us, and that's why is technology actually important? Why does it count? Why do we need technology in order to make this transition? And then we'll go into the panel. So right now, one of the major issues in our industry is lack of transparency. So yesterday I talked about ESG and how ESG is not really impactful and and not really transparent. So if we could actually use blockchain technology to record ESG metrics in a way that they're not tamperable anymore, then that's a perfect application for using modern technology in order to force something that otherwise might not be forcible. And also the lack of accountability and attribution. So particularly in the philanthropic sector, attribution is a huge issue. Who can take credit for what? Again, if we were to put impact events on a blockchain, for instance, then they're attributable, and you can say, well, this has actually happened because of my intervention. I think moving away from centralized, isolated, small, and fragmented efforts versus decentralization is we need technology to do that. And I think that in order to get away from the old theory that's driving the financial system, we need new data sets. We need new open data sets that actually are impact data sets. And in order to run artificial intelligence and learning algorithms over that, in order to move away from just the pure risk-return analysis that Uli mentioned today that the finance is running on, to actually integrate impact into that. And so in order to do that, we need technology in order to figure out how if financial returns and impact risk and financial risk are actually causally related or interrelated or not. The last thought that I have with respect to where technology is absolutely needed in order to make the transition is democratization of impact investing. So utilizing decentralized finance to move away from the elitist sport of doing impact investing to everybody participating in that. And that's, we just need to avoid, like I said yesterday, that we use decentralized finance in order to just replicate what we have, but we need to do it in order to implement the visions of the early anarchists almost in the blockchain community, which all came from Russia and Venezuela and Argentina, to really put a level playing field out there. So if we use these technologies actually correctly in order to drive that, as opposed to shoring up the existing system, then we have a chance of using technology to change it. So this is what I wanted to key off a little bit, and I share a couple of my own investments in this because later, if we have time, because these days now I invest in the intersection of impact and technology and consciousness. And just to tease your brains a little bit, in Munich, there is a tokenization effort going on about meditation. So if you're a meditator, you might have used one of these headbands, and the headbands measure your brain waves. And when your brain waves change, it's a proxy for going into deep meditation. Now, Bhutan is a country that actually realizes that if their monks meditate, that it's not only good for their monks, but it's good for society. So in that society, for instance, I could imagine that if the monks, when they meditate, they are supported by the government, that they get a meditation token, and the government then incentivizes certain businesses that are aligned with the spirituality of happiness of Bhutan, right? Then you can imagine that actually the society will benefit from a tokenization of going into deep meditation. It's a little stretch today, but it's happening, right? And we'll talk about other tokenization efforts, and Shermin is going to talk about that. That brings it down to earth a little bit more. I just wanted to see that too. And with this, I hand it off to you, Shermin, and to do positioning statements, and then I'll move over to Jutta and then Ricardo, and share with us a little bit what you're involved in, and then we take it from there.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm really happy for your introductory statements. Unfortunately, I hear myself here. If we think we are entering a new age of technology. Sorry, I have to put the headset away because I'm hearing myself. It's really hard to talk for some reason. So I hope you hear me.
Yeah, we hear you well.
It's really, I don't know how to do that.
On our side, you're fine.
I know, the thing is I hear myself double.
Okay.
In reverb, I'm just gonna, it's really hard to talk. Can you hear me now also?
Yes.
Well, okay, I hear less. So I really liked your introductory statement about using technology to pursue the goals that we have in society. And if this goal is sustainability, we can also use technology to do that. My particular focus is on Web3, this new generation internet and tokenization, and how we can use this new type of internet to have more transparency about what is happening in the world, as you also said, based on the collective data set that this new internet, this Web3 provides. So what is the Web3? Maybe with 2-3 short sentences for those who are not quite aware of it. Web3 is a term used by many people in the blockchain community that refers to this new generation internet, where the data in the backend of the internet is collectively managed by blockchain networks and other Web3 networks. So instead of private data management on a server of a private institution or private individual, where there is no transparency about, what happens to our data, whether it's personal data or product-related data. We now have a new type of internet infrastructure where we can manage data collectively, and the atomic unit of this new Web3 are the tokens. Now, tokens are very often mistakenly, we reduce them to what many refer to as cryptocurrencies, tokens that have money-like fungible qualities. But we can really use tokenization to reference every object in the world, whether it's an apple along a supply chain or a machine producing a photovoltaic unit producing energy. And when you can address every object, and all these objects have blockchain wallets, and they can now they're represented by one token, and this token can have complex data attached to it. We can start to do what you, Charly, referred to. We can have product passports, for example. We can start incentivizing people to completely new sets of value creation. And the first kind of paradigm shift was with the Bitcoin network, which is very often mistaken. It's not only a currency, but it's first and foremost a peer-to-peer payment network, and that is collectively maintained. And anyone can maintain it, and you're incentivized with the network token, the Bitcoin token in that case, to collectively maintain this public infrastructure. Now we can use the same paradigm to collectively maintain a social network. And we've seen social networks arise in the Web3 that are being used, some with more or less success, but I think it's just the beginning, such as Steemit, where you're incentivized for your contributions to a social network, whether it's contributing content or it's contributing curation or it's contributing with the underlying blockchain network services, you can earn Steem tokens. And very much the same, and we did a very interesting project when I was back in Vienna with the city in Vienna, which is still running, and CO2 tokens, we can use tokenization if you prove that you saved CO2 emission reduction. For example, as the city of Vienna is doing with their mobility behavior through an app that measures or tracks how you're moving through the city and whether you're using a car or public transport. There's public data that can see how you moved in the city correlated to the amount of CO2 emission reduction, and per kilogram or 10 kilograms of CO2 emission reduction, you can get, in the case of the Vienna token, one city token that you can then use for cultural activities. But we're seeing many, many other CO2 token use cases also emerge, where we can incentivize biodiversity, incentivize completely new sets of value creation. And we measure and track and trace this on this public infrastructure called the Web3, and kind of the backbone is the blockchain network. I hope that in the next round, I can deep dive on some of these use cases that are CO2 related.
That's great, Shermin. Thank you for this introduction. We'll do 2 rounds, and so we'll go a little bit deeper in the second round, but let me hand it off over to Ricardo to share a little bit what he is doing with a particular focus on AI.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. I work on AI applied to SDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And we published last year a study documenting our findings, the role of artificial intelligence in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in nature communications. One of the main conclusions that we find is that AI has a quite positive impact in most of the SDG targets. In 80% of the targets, AI can help. However, 35% of the targets can be inhibited due to the development of AI. And if you look at it from the distance, it seems that the effect of AI is mostly positive. We can actually benefit in a wide range of areas through this technology. The problem is that we should not undermine and we should not neglect the negative effects, because even one target being negatively affected by AI could have very catastrophic consequences if not properly understood and controlled adequately. So that's kind of like the potential. Going a bit in some of the details, I mean, we can split the SDGs into 3 main areas: the economy, the environment, and the society. And the AI can really help in the context of the environment and the society, although there are some risks associated to those areas yet. And I'd like to, one of the maybe more surprising conclusions that we had is that the positive evidence of positive impact of AI on the economy is perhaps not so well documented. There are research gaps to really pinpoint and assess the positive effects of AI on the economy. So that's one area where more work could be necessary. And on the other hand, the negative effects on the economy are perhaps better documented in the literature. So that's kind of like the overarching conclusion. I'd like to also highlight one important aspect, and is that AI regulation, now with the AI Act and the initiatives by UNESCO as well. Perhaps there is some emphasis on regulatory oversight and not enough emphasis on regulatory insight. So having experts and technocrats who know about the technology, who can be part of the decision-making process, and who can hopefully help to provide a little bit of insight into what can AI do and what it cannot do. And having this knowledge, having this information, being able to develop proper regulation. I would say that one of the problems with the current setup of the AI regulation is that AI is being considered globally without taking into account the context of the application. And that's problematic, because one cannot regulate this technology without seeing exactly how and for what it's being applied. So in that context, having more experts in the technology would help. And also, I mean, we know that AI is impacting everybody's lives. So perhaps an important aspect is to create a global dialogue. So everybody is part of it. Everybody is part of the regulation. Everybody is part of the conversation. And also the citizens, the general public, are aware of what this technology can do for them with their data, what happens with their data. I think that communication is key in this, and we have an example in the current COVID-19 times that we live. For example, with contact tracing apps that had some problems of public acceptance perhaps due to this lack of an appropriate communication of the technology. So I believe that this dialogue and involving the general public is also essential in order to harness the best potential from the technology towards the SDGs.
Great, Ricardo, you know, that's great that we should do that, but how do you do that with the Chinese?
Well, in the end, what one needs to think is of having global, some sort of global regulation or some possibility of making sure that we get the right type of regulation. If you don't regulate enough, then you have very important harms, as we have discussed, not in the context also of China, but globally. If you regulate too much, then you're harming the innovation and the development. So one needs to, well, perhaps find some, the UNESCO framework for AI guidelines of regulation is maybe a good starting point of some sort of global approach to this. But of course, this is also a political matter and industrial matter. There's economical interest as well. So it's not an easy problem, but perhaps it should be tackled more globally than it's currently being.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more in the second round about ethical AI and what that means. And now let me shift over to Jutta. And please give us your perspective representing the industry point of view in sustainability and technology. Yeah.
Happy to. So I'm trying to shift from academia to industry now. Why so? So I'm leading the sustainability initiatives at Microsoft Austria. I will focus mostly now today on the environmental part of the ESGs because of my academia background. We can talk about the social part as well afterwards. But for now, why is this important for all of you, impact investors, entrepreneurs who really want to drive impact? And Uli, you mentioned it. We're all part of this system. So how can you bring the impact into the system? And maybe I can give you some thoughts about that. Actually, what I truly believe is that we and this system that Uli mentioned, we run on financials. This is something that's seen really critical. I know I'm being a little bit provocative here, but companies, corporates run on financials. They have to be right, then we can talk about impact. Usually it is like this when you talk to any kind of, for example, manufacturing business in Austria, but also in the EU and probably globally. We gotta change this, but the good point is that actually if it's about the financials, sustainability and ecology can help us there to actually make them aware that this is good for business. Sustainability was very often seen in the future, in the past, as being this fluffy thing where some people in a company are trying to do some initiatives, putting it into a report, and that's it, and they just costed money. So this was the cost center. Sustainability was seen as cost center, and now we are shifting this mindset. You know, we're shifting this cost center mindset of sustainability to sustainability being a profit center. So companies are actually starting to realize that if they are implementing sustainability initiatives with the help of technology, that they will actually have a financial benefit. And this is a win-win situation in the end. So we have the win for the corporate, because if they are, for example, having more efficient operations, they save money. It's a win for them. It's a win for any kind of entrepreneur here who is maybe working with this company, because you're selling your solution and having impact there, also a win. It's a win for the planet because less CO2 is emitted, less material is used. And it's also a win for tech companies like Microsoft because you're hopefully running on those technologies to help you get there. So actually it's a 4 times win situation. And we all have to be part of this system and try to make this impact work. For example, we have a client at Microsoft, not naming it, but it's not an Austrian one, but a European client, has large production sites all over the world, so manufacturing business, emitting a lot of CO2, using a lot of material. We started off with this customer just discussing how can digital transformation, so in the operations, help this customer save a lot of money by becoming more efficient. And this was the mindset of the company just 2 years ago. We started off with several pilots just to try to reduce costs. And now the customer is actually aware that by making the production more effective, more efficient, and by reducing their costs, they're actually doing something good for their sustainability KPIs. happy shareholders, for example, you know? So it is a win-win situation there when corporates start to realize that sustainability is a profit center for them. And companies are moving there. I just know it from Austrian companies, but because I'm talking a lot to those clients there, but it's in general, I think, for all the European corporates the same. They're shifting there, and there are two reasons for it. The one is because they have leaders on the top that really believe in the impact. I work at a company where I'm lucky enough to say that our leaders, they really believe that we have a responsibility and we're also taking it. And there are a lot of others, and I think all of you're here because you believe that you have to have an impact. And then there's the second one, those corporates that are kind of forced to make an impact with their business or in their business because of regulations, because of their shareholders, because of impact investors. And this is exactly what I just want to give you on your way. If you're an impact investor, you can actually have a lot of say when it comes to digital transformation in corporates, so they actually also incorporate this impact they should have. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a startup founder, you have a lot of impact by talking to those large-scale customers about the impact they are having by not only being a cost center, but becoming a profit center. So there is so much possibility, and happy to talk about maybe some use cases afterwards.
Wonderful. Thank you. So please start asking questions now that you know where all the panelists are coming from. We'll do one quicker round of comments and then open it up for discussions. And before, Shermin, I go back to you, I wanted to share one of my investments that takes us back a little bit into the tokenization world so that you can then key off of that. And so we don't have anybody from Google and Facebook here, but I think that their business model is running out of steam and actually not working anymore. And because they monetize our behavior without our real consent, I mean, of course, you need to sign something, right? And then they send us advertisements that we don't ask for, and they make a ton of money of that, and they manipulate our behavior very subtly and not so subtly to sit in front of their applications longer in order to serve us more advertisements. I think that model is wrong, and it should die, hopefully sooner than later, because it actually has severe social consequences with respect to echo chambers and manipulation and really the bad things about maximizing shareholder value with our behavior, right? And so I thought, I want to invest in the future. And I was looking for, well, there's a lot going on for startups that are actually designing solutions that we can take ownership of our digital footprint again, right? We all have digital footprints, and they're being monetized right now with AI, by people who don't really care about, our data. And I think that's the wrong model. The data models have to change globally. So the data models of me owning, my Apple Watch is probably, monitoring me and sending my blood pressure data to Apple. Well, do I want that? No. Better than Chinese? Maybe. I don't know, but it goes to the insurance companies, and I don't like that. I want to be in charge of my data. It's my data, not somebody else's data. So I looked around. So about 3 years ago, I wanted to understand what's going on in that space. And I gave a keynote to the Blockchain Society of Silicon Valley, because I heard that Silicon Valley is changing. I did not go back to Silicon Valley for 15 years because I didn't find any impact. And so 3 years ago, I went back and started talking to the entrepreneurs there again. And indeed, I found some diverse entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, young, old entrepreneurs that actually cared, right? And through that network, then I understood what's going on in that community. And about a year ago, I invested in a company called Rainfall. And Rainfall, we're just starting the tokenization of raindrops as we speak in Switzerland, because you can't do it anywhere else. And with a process called staking, which is the follow-on process to mining, which is not as resource intensive as mining. We could never invest in Bitcoins because it's pure speculation and it uses too much too much resources. And so, and I would like to see the staking process move from normal stakers to impact stakers, just like we want to change from investors to impact investors. And so I'm working with the community to figure out, how to do that. What does Rainfall do? Well, it actually allows you to monetize your own digital footprint. And so it's a totally, and we want to actually work with the Global South so that anybody who uses an Android phone will be able to do what they want to do with their digital footprint, including monetizing it or giving it away or sharing it or whatever. And in order to do that, it's a fully decentralized financial platform. So Rainfall does not control any of the information. It's on the edges. So it's designed as a fully decentralized solution. And then you opt in. And the first network that we work with is Joy of Moms. And Joy of Moms is a network of 4 million mothers around the globe, and they have a functioning marketplace. And that marketplace, they don't want to monetize it with Facebook, and so they don't want to build their own digital wallet. So they come and we work with them to use Raindrops as their digital wallet and as their tokenization for services that they provide for moms, between moms. And nobody else gets any benefit from it, certainly not Facebook and Google, but only moms, right? And of course, there's a small fee to the network, which is transparent, and you can follow it. And so if we actually would be, it's a moonshot investment. So if you're successful in doing that, then we would have one alternative to what I just described. So that's, those are interesting efforts that combine, I think, impact and technology in a way that without technology you couldn't do it, and it's a systemic change play, that one of us will be successful, I'm sure. If not Rainfall, then somebody else, because there's hundreds of startups working on that issue. So hopefully I keyed up a little bit, Shermin, for you to dive into a couple of other examples for tokenization.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Very interesting. I'm happy to hear you're making this kind of investment. So what you were describing is tokenization of data, right? Data tokenization. And as I said in my first round, there are so many, we can literally tokenize everything, just as the first generation internet allowed us to create a website for everything. And then we refined it in the Web 2. And made the social interfaces better, more versatile. In this Web 3, we're completely changing the data structures in the backend. The killer application is a token, and we can now tokenize everything. Physical assets, data, as you described it, but also completely new types of value creation. And I would like to focus on kind of impact tokens with the focus on CO2 tokens. We can now say that, for example, CO2 has a value for society, and thank God we have had international treaties work this out over the last 20 years with the Paris Accord, etc. And we have even markets trading, for example, CO2 emission reduction, carbon certificates, etc. And these markets have also matured in the last, they're still not perfect, but they have matured in the last 20 years. So what we can do now, and I would like to bring, for example, I already told you about the Vienna project, and you might have heard it already in the media 2 years ago before it went on hold due to COVID. Another project I would like to tell you about is, for example, the Rebalance Earth. They are tokenizing they're creating a sort of biodiversity token. Mm-hmm. There is public data. The IMF has done studies that in Gabon, the forests that are where the forest elephants are extinct have 7% less CO2 capture than the forest where the forest elephants still live. So you can give a forest elephant a lifetime value over the 80 years that these around 80 years that the forest elephants live, and you can calculate the CO2 capture that results through the sheer existence of a forest elephant. Now, biodiversity conservation work is very costful, and there is a series of problems that paying forest rangers, making sure that there are enough fences, that the the neighboring, the elephants don't trespass the forest into a foreign territory where they destroy the crop of farmers and then the farmers shoot them. So Rebalance Earth came up with the tokenization concept where they tag the elephants and everything that is happening in the forest to measure the amount of elephants. And they tokenize every day of existence of this forest elephant and their CO2 capture for now only. And they can sell these CO2 kind of certificates on carbon markets. And make sure that the revenue goes back to paying more forest rangers, to paying the adjacent communities to not kill these elephants. And there you have two flies in one. You're doing biodiversity conservation, which is already being done, but you're additionally financing it through carbon certificates, because we as a society, we have said that saving the planet and capturing carbon is a value to us. And we can reflect this value through tokenization, but only if we measure what is happening in this forest. And we now, and this is where our topics are coming together. It's not only a question about of AI and then blockchain here and AI there. It's this kind of solution is only possible that when we put physical sensors in the forest, when we understand what we're measuring, how we're measuring it, how we're evaluating the data that we're measuring, working together with scientists, and then we can start to tokenize one aspect, carbon emission reduction, and in the future, hopefully also other aspects like water retention. So tokenization and the Web3 is a very efficient way to manage what is happening in the world, to track and trace what is happening in the world, and to give it a value and to manage that value in a way that wasn't possible before, even though we knew we should do it. So I hope that this is a very...
Okay, well, thank you. I think we got most of you, Shermin, and let me take over. So tokenization is also a way of aligning, I think that's where Shermin was going, to the intentionality, right, of the investor and the investee, for instance. And so a modern way of doing marketplaces. So if you could actually code up the intention of the investor, the impact investor, with a smart contract, which we're doing as we speak, right? And then the entrepreneur, you know, is actually coding up her intentionality with respect to impact. Then a smart contract can make these matches. And so with this, we go for the other two panelists. Just quickly, also make a couple of comments, and then we open up for Q&A. So Ricardo, ethical AI, right? I mean, most ethicists in Europe, I looked around, they're coming from the social side, and the Pope is really, you know, a great example of social, but they have no clue about technology. And so, you know, what does that mean? How do you bring this together?
Yeah, I think that it's very important to have joint work between experts in AI and philosophers, experts in ethics, experts in legal and economical actions as well, to be able to have an AI technology that is supporting the SDGs and that is helping the bulk of the society. One key aspect that I want to highlight is interpretability of AI. Typically, deep learning models that we have been hearing so much about, these neural networks, well, they are black boxes. I mean, you give them some data and then you get some results, but nobody really knows how the decision-making process is taking place. And it's important to highlight the need of more interpretable models. If we start to use AI applications in medical devices, we want to know why a certain diagnosis has been made in a certain way. And in that sense, there have been some classical methods of explainability of AI. That is not enough. Discussions with philosophers and experts in ethics, they really request that we need interpretable AI. And that should be one of the priorities, I think, in the short and mid-term development of AI technology. And
they have to be developed by diverse folks, and the data sets have to be diverse. And And you know, there's a lot of things that we need to watch out for that need to be regulated. And I think that any company that uses AI should be forced to have an ethical charter to put down what they believe in societal-wise and be held accountable by society for that. You know, but no, you know, that's because otherwise it can go really in the wrong direction. And last not least, Jutta, a little bit more, maybe some examples from the industry and your world about you know, digitalization and sustainability, and I'm intrigued by that profit center, you know, idea that you had and how that fits together.
I'll just kick off with what we talked about earlier on, right? Because it was exactly the need for standardization for ethical principles when it comes to using AI, but also any other digitization tools, right? It needs standards for any kind of software development. So at Microsoft, for example, we do have, of course, those ethical principles that we're using our own because there is no standardization. Of course, they're reviewed and everything, but I feel like it would be really good, at least within the EU, to have those principles set in stone that should be used by everyone. Same for the software development principles. Microsoft, we have these sustainable software development principles, meaning that all of the applications that you are using from Microsoft, they're actually developed based on those principles. So our developers, they have to think of the electricity demand of the applications when they're running in the data centers. They already have to think of, for example, the network capabilities and so on. All of this is based on sustainable principles that we're having at the core of the application. So I feel like what Microsoft is doing is a very good step, but we should broaden it to all kind of companies that are using those tools or that are developing those tools. So we need standardization. Maybe some other thoughts on like how Microsoft works with sustainability, but also the industry. What I didn't mention before, I feel like one really important point is the whole topic of how to get an overview of an end-to-end supply chain. Shermin already mentioned it, how important data is to actually be able to track our CO2 emissions, to have those, to actually fulfill those KPIs that corporates are setting in stone for themselves when it comes to sustainability. And this is something that we're lacking at the moment. We don't really have a clear picture of our supply chain. How much CO2, how much material, etc., is used by our suppliers. Microsoft started this program a while ago, so we do have a full picture of it. We know exactly our Scope 3 emissions, Scope 3 being the supply chain behind the operations. But a lot of companies, they don't have it because either they don't have the data, they don't have the capabilities for it, they don't have the technical system for it, and they don't have the standards for it in the end. So this is something that we really have to work on. And if any one of you, I'm talking like now to entrepreneurs and innovators of you, has an idea of how to do this end-to-end supply chain tracking based on digitization, feel free to talk to me. There are tons of solutions on the market, but I feel like none of them is is broad enough to actually standardize it and to actually use it on a large scale. And we really need this to get our data right and to get our supply chain right. And this can have an enormous impact when it comes to tracking our CO2 footprint, but also reducing our CO2 footprint, because we can't really reduce anything where we don't know the actual number that we're having, right?
Great, wonderful. So that completes sort of the rounds that we prepared, and I'm happy to go now into a couple of questions. Before we do that, we take the first question online and then prepare for you all. You know, the second investment that I've done amongst a few others is in Proof of Impact, that is a blockchain-based collection of data outputs, you know, that are impact outputs, basically. And so we use that in order to work with producers in India and IKEA to make sure that the supply chain for IKEA is actually socially compatible with the social standards that IKEA wants to use with respect to labor for their producers, right? And so they make sure that they only work, 10 hours a day and whatever, and not too much. And we use modern technology, like you suggest, right, to to document that, and then you don't have to fly around to see if there's child labor or not. Or we work with the Ethiopian government to lower the mortality rate of pregnant women. We know if they go to a hospital during their pregnancy, that mortality rate will go down. So anytime a woman goes to a hospital, we put that on the blockchain, and then the Development Bank of Netherlands pre-finances 10,000 of these, and then they save 400 lives by doing that. So very simple applications of modern technology. But as we build up data sets over time, over multiple years, then we can actually correlate these data sets with other healthcare data sets of Ethiopia that they provide to the UN, and then we get beyond beyond pure output analysis to actually AI-based analysis with feedback loops of the healthcare system of a country. And so that really moves. Yesterday we heard about the problems of and the opportunities of impact management. And so modern technology is being used to actually move the needle big time in understanding the impact outputs and outcomes that we all strive for. So what questions do we have coming in online?
Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, we're happy to have some engagement online. We apologize also for the technical difficulty with Shermin. I know some of the questions were directed towards her. Let's start with this one from David. So, talking about regulations, it's always a topic. How do we cohabit ever more restrictive regulations, for example, investor protection, GDPR, AML, with that need for flexibility to use tech for the impact investing? So where do you see that balance?
Do you want to take it on?
Yeah, I can start and then we can. I like to, in the context of AI, right? There is this big need for regulation, and everybody agrees on that. But I believe that the biggest problem is that the regulation is being done in a too generic way of AI technology. And AI technology, if you don't view it in the context of an application, is very abstract. You cannot regulate AI technology. And I believe that's the current direction that is being taken, both in the context of the AI Act of the European Union, but also the UNESCO initiatives. You cannot say that a classification algorithm, which in certain contexts can have bad consequences in social media, polarization of societies, you cannot then say that the classification algorithms are bad and cannot be used. You need to see the connection between the concrete algorithm that you're trying to regulate and the application where that's being to be deployed. This type of thinking requires a lot of multidisciplinary work, a lot of input from engineers, a lot of input from AI experts, policymakers, and users as well. So that's what I mentioned before about having this dialogue. It's important that we understand how AI is being used in each of the applications in order to develop a proper regulatory oversight of these applications. In my view, it's important to keep in mind the context of the applications and the context of the users that are going to be part of those applications. Otherwise, not only you will be harming the R&D, the development of this technology, also the enforceability of those regulations. If it's too abstract, then you won't be able to really find a way to enforce that policy.
And one issue is that it's European-based and not US and China-based, right? So there's no good answer for the global question and implications, and that is very scary to me.
That's scary.
Maybe one question out of here, and then another question online. Uli.
I've got one question for Jutta. Confronting what Charlie has been saying on the business models that are based on a different type of data management and ownership in the system. I think we all agree that when it comes to addressing this issue, we talk about changing business models. And when it comes to data management, data ownership, one of the issues that we're facing is the single commercialization point of data, which is basically the end of the food chain between advertiser and owner of the data. Now, the question that I have for you is, if we look at the breaking down of this food chain of data collection to the individual, ideally, and giving ownership to the individual, and possibly making that individual being part of the remuneration and the commercialization of data and the revenue streams that go with it. To what extent is Microsoft prepared for that evolution? And to what extent is it prepared to enable that?
If I got your question now right, let me try to answer. So on the one side, it's, and I'm usually industry focused, so I'm not talking about the individual itself, but on the industry, that's my specialty. So when we talk about the corporates, it would be about what you said before, modernization of the current state, using the data, trying to get new business models out of this data. So this is like basics. And how Microsoft is doing this, we're having a wave approach. So usually what we do, and I talk with my Austrian customers about it, and we have some really conservative customers in Austria, of course, when it comes to, for example, manufacturing industry. We can't talk about changing the business model to one that is using data and where the ownership of the data is with the corporate itself or individuals in the corporates, if the companies are not ready even to talk about modernizing what they have at the moment. So this is kind of where we're in between. We're trying always to talk about what could the future look like and how could your business models change in the end? How could you actually take the ownership of this data? But in the end, when it comes down to reality with the customers, European-wide and probably also same in the US, we can't have this conversation of innovation if we can't even get them to talk about modernization. So this is actually where we need to have this step approach. Start with the modernization, and with modernization comes the trust to technology, comes the trust in their own data, because they're getting to know their data, they're getting to know how to use their data now at the moment. And once we're done with this, we can actually start talking to them about how to take the ownership, how to create new business models around those data. Mm.
I think the requirement, Uli, is that will drive the industry if we agree on the requirements that we put on the industry, is that I would like to decide, what I was mentioning my healthcare data, right? And so if I would like to sell my healthcare data to an insurance company, I would not do that. I would want to make sure that my data is not used that. I would want to have the ability to say exclusivity or not, longitudinal or not, aggregated or not, right? And I would, and if it's, for instance, to a research effort, maybe I give my longitudinal private data to them for free, right? And so that's what we need to take control of our own data. And I think the ownership and control will be two different things in the future. And there's no clear models yet, about how the clouds are regulated, and that's Microsoft's business, and that's other people's business. I just believe that we need to take back control of our own data, and if we enable sharing, well, that's great. I mean, enable sharing, right? We'll see how that goes. Now, an online question?
We do, but I think we might be close to out of time.
Well, quick one.
So, yeah, how about rebound effects? So when incentivizing emissions reductions with rewards, how do you see this topic of the rebound effect?
The rebound effect,
Sorry, the rebound effect being if I'm rewarded for creating less emissions here, maybe I use that reward and then have more emissions somewhere else. If I get money back for this and then you go spend it on a flight to Mallorca.
Yeah, maybe I can comment on it. I think that an idea that is an old idea, but nowadays is starting to get some thrust again, is PCAs, personal carbon allowances. That's an idea that has to do with the individual responsibility of emissions. It can also be applied to companies and to production chains. And now with all the technology that we have been talking about today, with blockchain, with mobile phones, with tracking of all the sources of the energy that you're using, to have an allowance of emissions individually that you can use. And then in that sense, you can choose to fly to Thailand and then use those emissions, but then to compensate for that, you need to commute to work and not use a car. I think that this, which used to be kind of like a dream some decades ago, may be now feasible, and there's quite some work in the context of nature, and there's quite some publications in this direction. There's quite some agreement that with current technology that's doable. And in that sense, you would avoid the rebound effect because you are limited. You have a number of credits, and you can choose. You also have the freedom of choosing how you want to use them. Because not everybody, it would not be fair to say that now nobody can fly. I mean, some people would prefer to do that and instead commute, or there's also quite some technology using blockchain and artificial intelligence to assess the origin of the energy that you're using, and that's actually a quite important aspect in the context of this. So I believe that this sort of application should be implemented more and more, particularly in the context of the current climate crisis that we live, and that can actually help. So perhaps that would be one direction.
So we just scratched the surface, okay? So we talked about AI, blockchain, tokenization, impact, and it was not realistic to give you a full sense of everything. I'm sure that there's more questions that you have than answers right now. And so I see this as the beginning of a conversation. I think that the impact community is a lot of times fearful of modern technology, and we need to bridge that gap sooner than later, because otherwise technology will control us and not the other way around. And it's actually going in that direction right now. And so we need to demand that technology is serving the transition and the consciousness that we talked about in the morning, to help us and not destroy us. So with this, I would like to give a big hand to our panelists, to Jutta, Ricardo, and Shermin. Thank you very much. And to Diego for supporting us. Thank you very much.